Okay, so Horizon Air managed cloud or cloud managed version of Horizon Air. The other big thing here is we're not using, because we're not using Windows, we're not using SQL, there's no licensing involved in that right now, and we'll talk about that. From a conceptual standpoint, kind of a 1, 2, 3 process. I want you to be able to use a common app capture to be able to make app stacks. So an app stack, I'll kind of go into that a little bit, is what it kind of sounds like, a stack of apps. It's a VMDK or a VHD, and that's what we mean by a common app capture, because you're going to be able to use this on physical machines, not right now, but we're going to have a release a little later, Project A Squared that we talked about last year at VMworld. This is also what's the engine behind that. So I need a VHD format, and I need a VMDK format for things that are going to be hosted on vSphere. The ability to deliver things real time, so be able to snap those app stacks into a user session in real time and have them be able to use them immediately, to be able to swap them out in a life cycle kind of a thing so that I can update them and create new sessions. And then just being able to do things in one way. So one of the things you'll learn here is we're going with a unified management console between this, which is app volumes that I'm talking about, and also User Environment Manager, the UEM product, to be able to handle customizations for the applications as well as various user environment settings, but doing that all in one console. So the ability, when we set things up here, you've got the OS running, you've got an app volumes agent running in that OS, and then I can snap in these app stacks, and I can snap in multiple app stacks in a particular desktop so that I can kind of mix and match what applications that users have. I can also put in a writable volume. That writable volume allows users to have user-installed applications. It allows them to persist settings. It gives you a really easy way from an administrative standpoint to handle the user-installed use case in a virtual desktop, but still use a disposable desktop, because what we're really going for here is a just-in-time desktop where, as Sean kind of talked about this morning, you log in, you get a clean desktop, you log off, it gets completely thrown away, and you get a brand new desktop, and then everything you need gets snapped into that desktop. So apps become available, when I associate them, they become available to that user pretty much immediately so that they can start working with them. Also, just in terms of life cycle, we're going to talk about this a bit, the ability to be able to manage that entire life cycle for the app. So from the initial distribution to patching and updating those applications until their eventual retirement. So I may have app stacks that have applications that we're going to pull out. I want to be able to manage that entire life cycle in one place, and we can do that with app volumes. As I said, basically I can logically manage things. If you take a look at the graphic here, you see kind of different departments or different user groups that might have app stacks. So I can segregate app stacks into use case or user group or departmentally, or pretty much any way I want to do that and kind of mix and match that user experience for the user. I can also do things like app isolation. In fact, we have a feature called app isolation, which I'll let you know a little secret, is basically thin apps that are going to be as part of that app stack, because there's still use cases for that. If I need to handle multiple Java versions and be able to isolate those applications from each other to support that, I can do that because I can just drop those thin apps into a given app stack and have those applications be ready. So this is kind of what it looks like from a user standpoint. I've got a user here maybe who's getting apps from a couple different groups, engineering, finance, plus their core apps. The core apps being something that everybody within the company gets. I have the ability to kind of logically manage those things as I talked about between user groups, and then when I need to do an update, I can update those core apps. So we got a new version of Microsoft Office, or more likely what seems like weekly update to Microsoft Office. I can update that, and I can swap out that app stack. So that old app stack with the older version, I basically unentitle those users. They get the new version so that the next time they log in, they get those apps immediately. Now we don't want to do that right away, because we don't want to pull an app from a user who might be running it, because then bad things happen. So we typically do it on the next login. And we keep talking about this sort of just-in-time thing, the concept of the stateless desktop. We used to really segregate, persistent desktop, non-persistent desktop. Now we're starting to bring that together because of some of these things that we can snap in, like app stacks, to be able to get applications, the ability to do folder redirection, which has been around forever, but the ability to customize applications with User Environment Manager. I really can turn that C drive into like a cable box, right? So I put my cable box in, I get all my programming. If the cable box breaks, well, I get a different cable box and plug it in. The programming still comes. So I treat my C drive as a disposable commodity, basically. So let's look a little deeper into what makes up App Volumes. So App Volumes Manager is a server. In our case, it's going to be, with App Volumes 3, it's going to be an Ubuntu server. We'll talk about that here, an appliance that I deliver. That's where my agents check in. That's where I go and basically do all my management through the user interface. There's an agent that talks to that server. It gets its entitlements. It lets a server know what state it's in terms of, am I logging in, am I logging off, so that things can change with those app stack assignments. There's a unified admin console. So I've been talking about this a little bit. I'll talk about it a little more. That is going to manage both what we're talking about here with App Volumes, as well as a User Environment Manager. So things like folder redirection or device map or drive mappings or settings for particular applications all can get managed through a single unified console. The app stack really is the meat of things. That's the read-only volume that the applications are on that gets attached to the machine and that makes the applications available for the users. And we can put multiple applications in an app stack. We can put single applications in an app stack. We have a lot of functionality over that, or a lot of flexibility over that in terms of how you put together app stacks. I kind of talked about the use cases here where maybe I'm doing it along departmental lines or group lines or use case lines. And then finally, the writable volume. The writable volume being that read-write volume that I can give to a user so that they can do user-installed applications or persist settings. So as I mentioned, this version will be a virtual appliance, Ubuntu-based appliance. It's got an embedded Postgres database, so the App Volumes database will be Postgres for version 3. We've used SQL for 2.x. It's on board with the appliance. I can very easily deploy the appliance. It's a pretty simple process. I configure it, and I basically am pointing my agents at that appliance. And I can have multiple appliances. So if I want to scale, and I'll talk a little bit about scale at the end, I can have multiple appliances. Of course, we recommend you have no less than 2, just for high availability, fault tolerance. So I talked about the unified admin console. So we can do a lot of different things in the console. I'll just kind of quickly talk through a few things here. I can go through and I've got a monitoring dashboard, so I know how many app stacks are mounted, how many customizations are going out there, how many users are using things at a particular time. So I got one place to look at all of that. I can do all my assignments from there. So we create a service. The application, let's say Qt-FTP becomes a service. I can go and assign that service to users and groups. Same thing with customizations. The customization may be a service. I do it all through the console. I look at my inventory, so I see what apps that I have in there, what customizations are available, and again, who's using those things in terms of what's available. And I set up some things here. There's a few locations. One of the nice things here is a lot of this works based on a file share somewhere. So when I say that, what I mean is when I get app stacks, I drop them into a file share, and the console goes out and syncs with that file share periodically. And so then it populates the applications that are available. And when I do my unified capture, I can have them drop those right into the file share because I can kind of automate that process. So then those applications become very immediately available. Same thing with the customization side. I'll create a file share for those. So just taking a kind of quick look at the workflow, if I want to assign an application to somebody, it's really pretty straightforward. I set a new assignment. Notice I've got 2 different kinds of assignments here. We're talking about applications right now. I'm not going to get into customizations much just because of limited time here. I don't want to kind of muddy this with the user environment manager side of things, but I can do customization assignments as well from this screen. When I do that, I can set up that application assignment, what OS is it? I can also decide if I want to give a writable volume out at that point. I just have to flip that little button there, and then that user is going to get a writable volume they can use. I just pick the application. Again, there'll be a whole list of applications available in a production environment. And I can then assign it to users and groups. So I've assigned it here both to a user and a group. And then once that's done, that user has access to that, and I can go in and check the entitlement on the desktop. So they'll get that the next time they log in. It's pretty straightforward. One of the things we're going for here is real ease of operations. We kind of talked about that with Horizon hybrid mode, and we want the same sort of thing here when we're talking about app volumes and user environment manager, a simple user experience that I can do from an HTML5 web browser. So app capture is the way we get applications ready for an app stack. It's really the process we go through to bring an application into an app stack. It's really a pretty simple process. And you'll notice from the graphic here that I'm showing that app stack, which is, that little thing in the middle there, can go to a virtual machine or a physical machine. I talked about that a little. We're going to release later this year the ability to do that onto physical machines, so specifically on Windows 10 machines, to be able to take the VHD file, and we're also putting out the VMDK file. So this common capture process does both of those. It also spits out a JSON file, which has some of the metadata controlling things, but it gives me the ability to go and set that up in one place and have it be usable in both platforms. So just to kind of give you an idea what this looks like, app capture is a command line. Now, the advantage of this is we can automate this process. So we can automate the process from capturing the application all the way to dropping it in the file share on app volumes so that it's available to be assigned. So it's really pretty flexible that way. All I've really got to do is give the application a name, and then I basically start my install process. I can also specify the output directory so that it goes directly into that file share if I want it to. And I go and install the application. Whatever the application is, if it requires 3 reboots to install or whatever it happens to be, we'll continue the process until we've decided that the process is done and we complete the process. So you basically go into the command screen and hit enter. The process gets completed. You can also automate that with Power CLI. And then once that's done, it's gonna reboot and finish that process, and then we'll put out the files. So they'll end up in that share, and what it'll look like is you'll have a JSON, a VHD, and a VMDK available, as I mentioned already, and it'll just drop right into the file share so that it's ready for provisioning. Then you can go into the unified console. You can either wait for the sync to happen, or if you're impatient like I am, you can go and hit the sync button, so it'll go out and sync with the file share, and then those will be ready to be able to provision to people. So I'm going to talk about a feature here that's new with App Volumes 3, but I'm going to do a little setup to it first. So there's a new feature called App Toggle, so that I can bring applications together in one stack, as we talked about. So an app stack could be one application, it could be 40 applications. It doesn't much matter. What I do here is a merge process. So I've created a single app stack, and I'm just going to kind of blow through this really quickly because the idea here is I create the single app stack maybe for 20 things, and then I'm going to use this merge process to bring them all together into a single app stack so that at the end of it, I've got a merged app stack. So in this case, I have one that was 3 applications, 3 individual applications, and I put it out as 3 apps.vmdk. Those applications will then enumerate individually in the console. So when I go and look at it in the console, after I sync, each application will be listed, and I'll show it to you here as I talk about App Toggle. So App Toggle is a way to kind of manage things a little more granularly than you perhaps were before. So before, or currently I should say, you create an app stack, and there's 5 applications in the app stack, and you give that app stack to a user, they're going to get all 5 applications. But maybe there's an application in there I don't want them to have. App Toggle enables that. So it enables me to put together a big app stack with a bunch of applications, and then turn off access to specific applications by just not entitling the user or group to those applications. So I can maintain fewer app stacks than before. I don't have to attach as many app stacks to the end user, but still maintain the licensing that I want to maintain by just either entitling them as a user or group or not entitling them. So it just gives me more granular control and will help with that application lifecycle because I have less app stacks to manage. The way this works is I set up that assignment. I bring my applications. I had those 3 merged applications that we talked about before. Then when I bring that into the console, and here I'll show you that here in a sec. When I bring that into the console, you'll see, and this, I'm sorry, this is really light. Didn't realize this was so light. On the bottom, there's 3 different applications. Those are all a single app stack, but they enumerate out as 3 different applications because then I can go and entitle users to just the applications I want them to have. So in this case, I'm just going to give them VLC and the remote NG and not give them the 3rd application. And then when they log in, even though that's the same app stack and that app stack is getting attached to them, they're going to get just the applications that we entitled them to. So it gives us a lot more control over what applications within an app stack that users get. So now I can build a big app stack and just give users 2 or 3 applications out of that if that's all they need. App scaling with multi-zones, really cool, fancy marketing name for being able to really easily replicate these app stacks between vCenters. So if I've got a situation where I've got multiple vCenters in my environment, we will be able to go and drop these into a share, just like we've been doing. Tell app volumes, hey, data stores on 3 different vCenters need these app volumes, and automatically provision those out to those additional vCenters. So to be able to go and do this in one place, and it's pretty straightforward to set up. You're basically going to add your vCenter. You're going to add a secondary vCenter. Make sure it's talking to the app volumes manager. If I needed to add multiple vCenters, I could go ahead and add, 3 or 4 vCenters in here. I'm not sure if there's a specific limit right now. I don't think there is, but I can add multiple vCenters. And then those vCenters are available. All the apps that are attached, or all the apps that are in the catalog, will automatically get dropped onto data stores in multiple vCenters. So if we go and look at data stores on those multiple vCenters, those are there. Now, when I set up the vCenter initially, I tell App Volumes Manager what data stores I want things on. I can either set with a pattern, like if you're naming your data stores by pattern, I can just put the pattern in there, or I can put the individual names of the data stores. So we already know what data stores the vCenter is using. When I go and set up additional vCenters in here, then we have the ability to just scale those app stacks out across all those vCenters. So I've talked a little bit about user-installed applications with writable volumes. One of the problematic use cases for linked clones has always been user-installed applications, right? Because we're going to go through operations where we're going to reset or recompose those machines. And so if a user installs something on the C drive, it gets nuked if we go through the process of resetting or recomposing. So people who had to have user-installed applications either never recompose their linked clones, really, really bad idea, or use full clones, right, and manage them kind of like a physical desktop. Well, we can get away from that here because if we attach a writable volume to a machine, we can give the users rights to install user-installed applications. They can also delete those applications. We'll continue to keep track of that on the writable volumes. But it allows us to, again, we're talking about piecing together a just-in-time desktop experience here. It allows us to give them a really clean C drive, add the app stacks that they need for their corporate apps and their departmental apps, and then give them this additional writable volume that lets them go and install the apps that you're going to allow them to install. And of course, they have to have administrative rights to be able to do that. We can also configure this. It's very granular. There's a config file I can go in and say, I want you to capture these specific registry entries or these specific directories. I can add, I can exclude. So I have some ability to kind of control that user experience. I also have the ability to create custom writable volume templates. So maybe I don't want to give user group A as much leeway and as much disk space as user group B, so I could have a smaller writable volume for user group A than I do for user group B. So a lot of flexibility in there in terms of how you construct that desktop using app stacks and writable volumes. I already talked about app isolation. So ThinApp is a really tried and true technology. We've had it for a long time. It's been around for, I think, since it was originally Thinstall, I think it's been around for about 15 years now. A lot of great things you can do with ThinApp. The biggest thing is this ability to isolate. So if I need two apps to run side by side that normally would not work and play well with others, I can do that with ThinApp. And I can drop ThinApps into an app stack just as I can install applications into an app stack so that I can maintain that kind of a user experience. So ThinApp is part of the packaging for app volumes, for every edition of app volumes we have. There's a lot of really great use cases for it. When I first started doing this, and I've been with VMware for just under 8 years now, and April 28th will be 8 years, I spent a lot of time with ThinApp and a lot of time been in the end user computing space for most of that time that I've been here. And everybody wanted to ThinApp everything. And really, some organizations did that, but the most compelling reason to ThinApp is if you've got a problem to fix. And ThinApp's really good at fixing some problems, and it works very well with obviously app volumes and the Horizon environment as well. So just going to talk about a little scaling things, little architectural things, couple things. As I mentioned, the App Volume Manager is the basic building block. We never want to have just one of them. We want to have at least two, regardless of the size of your environment, because we want to make sure that we've got a way to back up here. A couple of best practices. We want to have about one app stack per 2,000 virtual machines. So no more than that. I talked about setting up storage before. So the way this works is I set up a storage group within App Volume. So let's say I need 5,000 users to have a particular app stack. I set up a storage group and set up a replication policy that says, make sure these app stacks get put across 3 different storage groups or data stores so that I can scale up beyond that 2,000 number. So you can automate that within App Volume. So you don't have to worry about, I got to monitor how many users are doing that, because we'll do that on the back end. No more than 15 app stacks per user. It's a rough number. It's not a hard and fast limitation, but each app stack that gets mounted will add a little time to log in. We put out a reference architecture at the end of last year you can take a look at to kind of get an idea of what that looks like. It also makes managing it a little more difficult. One of the things that app toggling should do is to make it attractive to limit the number of app stacks in total that you're using, because now that I can individually turn off the access to applications by group, I maybe don't need as many app stacks. And then about 2,000 agents per manager is the tested limit. I won't spend a ton of time on this, but this is just kind of our standard Horizon pod and block architecture. So the concept is I've got this management block that has my vCenters in it, and it has my database. This is where my app volumes managers are going to live as well as part of this management block. And then I have desktop blocks, and the desktop blocks have the actual desktops themselves, shared storage, maybe RDSH hosts, those kinds of things. This is the way this kind of snaps into the Horizon architecture. Is we're going to typically put the App Volumes Manager within that management block along with the connection servers for the users, and then build our blocks up on top of that. So we call that whole thing, we call a pod, and each is a block. And the blocks are about 2,000 desktops apiece. The pod would scale out beyond that to the 10,000 desktop mark or more, basically with 7 connection servers as part of that. Okay, that's what I had. I wanted to leave time for questions. Anybody have any questions? Way in the back.
I have a question on the unified management or admin council.
Yep.
A little confused. Yesterday there was a deep dive into Horizon 7 and they spoke about the unified admin council. Is it per product or
So, okay, great question. So currently, this unified management console covers app volumes and user environment manager. It doesn't cover Horizon 7 itself. It will eventually. So let me just give you kind of another look at this. What we talked about the Horizon Air Hybrid mode. So that has a unified management console, and it really is the same unified management console, but it adds in the ability to provision desktops. So that product is completely managed from that unified management console. Right now, the unified management console, if you're in a classic Horizon 7 environment, you're going to get user environment manager and you're going to get app volumes to be able to manage that. We're bringing this together, right? This is kind of the first shot over the bow at bringing together a full unified management console. But we've got multiple products that have a history, like for example, Horizon 7, that we have to bring that functionality in. So we have to do it kind of iteratively to make that happen. But great question.
What's going to happen with your 2.9 app volumes or 2x app volumes to 3 with all your current app stacks and Red Bull volumes and things like that?
So, great question. Right now, there's two different stacks right now. So when we first release this, App Volumes 3 is going to be its own stack. App Volumes 2.10 is the current version, is going to be its own stack. We'll start to bring that together here as the year progresses, where I can take my 2.10 app stacks and bring them over into the 3 environment. So general rule of thumb is if you're already using App Volumes right now and you're on 2.x, stay there for now. Don't go to 3. Look at 3 in your test environment as an initial point to be able to start to do that. As 3.1, 3.2, 3.3 come out, we'll start to bring some of that together. So you'll start to see more convergence there. Right now, general rule of thumb is if you're new to app volumes or if you're wanting to use this with instant clones in Horizon 7, then App Volumes 3 is the way to go. Otherwise, stay with App Volumes 2.x for the time being. It's a little I'll admit it's a little counterintuitive just because the expectation is it's a 3.0, so that just stacks on top of 2. But because we made the port over to the Linux side, some things changed. Yep.
Is there any isolation between the app stacks at all? So if I've got a dependency, I can have that in one app stack and...
So there's no isolation. In fact, any conflicts will be honored too. So if you install and give people app stacks with conflicting applications, those will get honored too. So, but to your point, if I need a dependency from some other app stack, as long as I got both app stacks, I'm okay. Yep. The only isolation comes from if you thin app something inside the app stack. So that's why we have the thin app capability in there for when you need the isolation.
So you talked about dropping the thin app into an app stack to solve some of the network issues with thin app. What does the app stack really bring you, or app volumes really bring you from a network perspective?
From a network perspective?
I guess I took in my notes it would avoid the...
Yeah. So, okay, sorry. So that's the traditional way of doing thin apps was to stick them out on a file share and then stream them in, right? And it really wasn't a stream. It was a bring it in and then run it. If it's in the app stack, it's side loaded into the machine. So it's local basically. So I'm not streaming it across the network. So that's same thing with the app stack. It's as if it's locally installed.
Side loaded from a data source, from a VDI. How about a physical?
Right now we don't support physical. What's coming is we're gonna drop a VHD in, and so then that's gonna get side loaded into the OS too. Yeah. Other questions?
I have one more.
Yep.
The app capture, is there versioning available now? The first time when I was introduced, it really wasn't advertised as something where if I have a stack already created with an application in it, and a new version comes out, am I allowed to present that to test users and then easily roll back? How is that handled?
It would be handled in separate app stacks, much the same way as it is now. So I'd have, let's say I have app stack A with version 2 in it. and then I take AppStack A and I use it as the basis to upgrade to version 3, I would have 2 separate AppStacks. So I could take version 2 away from the user, give them version 3, and then if that AppStack is still existing and I have problems with version 3, I unentitle them to version 3 and give them the AppStack with version 2 in it.
To just clarify, you would copy an AppStack and then upgrade it, or you would start second?
You would start a second AppStack. Yeah.
Well, it copies the first one and you overlay on it.
Yeah. Yeah. You're basically taking the VHD and using that as the basis, and then you're doing your install on top of that. So you can grab a copy of the AppStack and start from there.
When these are provisioned into this file share that you described,
Mm-hmm.
are they then copied out to a data store?
Yes. Yeah. So you drop them in the file share, and then that capability just brings them out into the data and drops them into the data store. So you've set up vCenter and told it which data stores you want it to use, and it'll automatically drop them in there.
So this file share is on a Windows server that can easily be backed up then?
Yeah, or a CIF share. Yeah, right. Yes, right. And then I can use DFS to be able to keep that. Yep.
So the writable volumes for the users, that would be a VHD, or would that be?
It's a VMDK and it's a 1-to-1. So although I can have app stacks shared between multiple users, each user gets their own writable volume. App stacks are read-only, writable volumes are read-write.
Are the limits on the number of app stacks, is that a hard rule, or is that?
It's not a hard rule. It's not like you're going to get to 2001 and the console is going to say, "Oh, you're at 2001." It's a general architectural best practice, and you really don't want to get much beyond that, just because and it's also going to be dependent on sort of your underlying storage, right? So you got to keep that in mind as well. Way in the back.
Physical desktop queue would now be available.
I do, but I can't say. Later this year.
Is that Windows 10?
Windows 10, yeah. Yeah. Other questions? Okay, appreciate your time. Again, I'm around all day. Feel free to, kind of buttonhole me and ask questions. And I think the next thing you got is a lunch. Thank you.